You've seen it 100 times. You say something to your dog, maybe their name, maybe a word they love, and their head slowly tilts to one side. One ear drops. Their eyes get wider. And for just a moment, it looks like they understand every single word you're saying. Most people think it's just cute, a quirky little habit, something dogs do to look adorable. But scientists have been studying this behavior for years, and what they found is nothing like what anyone expected. That head tilt isn't random. It isn't accidental. And it isn't just about hearing you better. What's actually happening inside your dog's mind in that moment is far more fascinating and far more meaningful than most dog owners ever realize. In the next few minutes, you're going to find out why your dog tilts their head and why some dogs do it constantly while others almost never do. You'll learn what your dog is actually processing when they hear you speak, why certain words trigger the tilt and others don't, and what it could mean if your dog suddenly stops doing it altogether. That last one is something every dog owner needs to know. Stay with this all the way through, because the final section gives you something genuinely useful, a way to bring out more of this behavior in your own dog and deepen the connection behind it. Let's start at the beginning. The real reason your dog tilts their head. You're sitting on the couch one evening and you say the word walk. Your dog's head snaps sideways like a compass needle finding north. Their brow furrows just slightly. Their whole body seems to lean into the sound. It's one of the most recognizable things dogs do. And for a long time, nobody knew exactly why. A landmark study published in the journal Animal Cognition finally gave us a real scientific answer. Researchers observed 40 dogs during a series of object label knowledge tests. They watched how the dogs responded while listening to human speech, and they tracked every head tilt. What they found was striking. There was a strong, consistent correlation between head tilting and the processing of meaningful verbal information. In other words, your dog isn't tilting their head because a sound surprised them. They're doing it because they're concentrating. The tilt is a physical signal of deep mental engagement. It means your dog has heard something they recognize as important, a word they know, a tone that matters, and their brain has shifted into a higher gear to process it. Head tilts are associated with increased attention and mental effort. Think of it the way a person might lean forward in a conversation or squint slightly when trying to understand something. The body moves to match the level of focus the mind is applying. Your dog's head tilt is that same instinct, just expressed in a completely different form. What's more, researchers noted that the tilt was most pronounced when dogs were listening to commands or phrases they had been trained to recognize. When the language was unfamiliar or meaningless to them, the tilts were rarer and less sustained. The tilt, in essence, is proof of comprehension, or at least the active pursuit of it. Your dog is not just hearing noise. They are genuinely trying to understand you. Why your dog tilts more to one side here is something most dog owners have never thought about. But once you notice it, you'll see it every single time. Your dog probably tilts their head the same direction most of the time. Not always, but there is a preferred side. And this is not a coincidence. Just like humans have a dominant hand, dogs have a dominant side. Most dogs are right-pawed, meaning they favor their right limb when reaching for food, navigating stairs, or picking up toys. This lateralization, the brain's tendency to assign different functions to different hemispheres, runs through nearly everything a dog does. And the head tilt is no exception. The direction a dog tilts, their head is linked to which hemisphere of their brain is doing the heavier lifting during a given moment. When a dog is processing something emotionally significant, the sound of your voice, a word they love, the two hemispheres of the brain can respond slightly differently. The side the head tilts toward gives researchers a small but real window into which part of the brain is dominant in that dog for that type of stimulus. Interestingly enough, studies have also found that dogs tend to wag their tails more to the right when they see their owners, and more to the left when they encounter something threatening or unfamiliar. The brain's asymmetry shapes even the most seemingly simple physical responses. The head tilt follows the same pattern dot, so if your dog almost always tilts left, that's not an accident. It reflects something consistent about how their brain is wired. It's a quirk of their individual neurology, as personal to them as being left-handed is to a person. Your dog has a signature tilt, and that signature is a small fingerprint of the mind behind those eyes. What your dog is actually hearing when you SBAK. To understand the head tilt more deeply, you have to understand something remarkable about how dogs hear. Dogs don't process your voice the way another human would. They are not hearing a stream of language the way you are. They are doing something far more selective, and in some ways, far more sophisticated. Dogs hear a much broader frequency range than humans do. Where a human can hear sounds up to roughly 20,000 hertz. A dog's upper range extends to 65,000 hertz or beyond. They can detect sounds 4 times farther away than we can, and they can move each ear independently to pinpoint the direction of a sound with extraordinary precision. When your dog tilts their head, part of what they may be doing is physically repositioning one ear to capture a specific frequency more clearly. But here's where it gets truly interesting. Research has shown that dogs process the emotional tone of your voice in the right hemisphere of their brain, while they process the actual words and content in the left hemisphere. They are running 2 parallel analyses simultaneously. One asking what is being said, and one asking how does this person feel. Both pieces of information matter to them. Both shape how they respond. This is why your dog reacts differently to the same word said in different tones. Say, "good boy," in a flat, tired voice, and they may barely react. Say it with warmth and enthusiasm, and they light up. They aren't just hearing the word. They are reading the emotional data embedded in how you said it. The head tilt, in this context, may be their way of synchronizing those 2 streams of information, leaning into the sound to process both channels as completely as possible. Why your dog tilts at certain words, but not OTHRS if you pay close attention. You'll notice your dog doesn't tilt their head at everything you say. They might tilt when you say their name. They might tilt when you say outside or treat or let's go. But a long sentence about your day might get nothing but a blank stare. This is not selective hearing. This is something much more specific. The animal cognition study found that head tilts were strongly linked to what researchers called object label knowledge. Dogs that had been taught to associate specific words with specific objects, a ball, a rope, a named toy, were significantly more likely to tilt their heads when they heard those words. The tilt appeared to mark the moment of recognition, the instant when an incoming sound matched something already stored in the dog's memory. Think of it like a keyword alert. Your dog is listening to a stream of human speech and filtering it continuously. Most of what you say doesn't match anything in their mental library. But when a familiar word surfaces, a word they've been trained on or heard enough times to associate with something real, their brain flags it. The tilt follows almost immediately. It's the physical expression of a cognitive match. Surprisingly, this also means that the more words your dog knows, the more frequently you will see the tilt. Vocabulary and head tilting are directly connected. A dog with a rich library of learned words will tilt often, because they are constantly recognizing things in conversation that a less trained dog would simply filter out. Every head tilt is a small sign that a word has landed, that it meant something, that your dog is genuinely engaging with the language you share. Why some dogs tilt more than OTHERSU may have noticed that certain dogs seem to tilt their heads constantly, while others almost never do. You might have assumed it was just personality, but there's actually much more going on beneath the surface. Breed plays a meaningful role. Dogs bred for close communication with humans, herding breeds like Border Collies, retrievers like Golden, and Labrador Retrievers, and working dogs like German Shepherds tend to tilt their heads more often. These breeds were developed over generations to pay close attention to human cues, read intention, and respond to nuanced commands. Their attentiveness is not just cultural. It is literally bred into them. There is also a category of dogs that researchers have begun calling gifted word learner dogs. These are individual dogs, regardless of breed, that have developed an unusual capacity for learning and retaining the names of objects. The most famous example is a Border Collie named Chaser, who learned the names of over 1,000 objects and could retrieve any one of them by name alone. Dogs like Chaser showed dramatically elevated head-tilting behavior because so much of what was said to them triggered genuine recognition. Age matters too. Younger dogs, who are still in active learning phases, tend to tilt more frequently than older dogs who have either fully mapped their vocabulary or become less responsive to new stimuli over time. Training history makes an enormous difference as well. A dog that has spent years in engaged, language-rich training will tilt more than a dog that has had minimal verbal interaction with their owners. What all of this points to is something deeply encouraging. Head tilting is not a fixed trait. It grows with engagement, with learning, with the relationship between dog and owner. The more you invest in communicating with your dog, the more you will see that tilt dot what IT means when your dog stops TILTS. This is the part of the conversation most dog owners are not prepared for. You've had your dog for years. They used to tilt their head constantly, at their name, at the leash, at the sound of the treat bag. And then one day, you realize you haven't seen it in a while. Maybe weeks. Maybe longer. For most owners, the first instinct is to wonder if something is wrong. And the truth is, sometimes that instinct is worth listening to. A sudden or significant reduction in head tilting can sometimes signal hearing loss. As dogs age, their hearing can decline, particularly at higher frequencies. If your dog is no longer catching the sounds that used to trigger a tilt, it may not be that they've stopped paying attention. It may be that they can no longer hear clearly enough to engage in the same way. If you suspect this, a veterinarian can perform a simple hearing assessment. Neurological changes can also affect the head tilt response. Dogs with vestibular disease, a condition that affects balance and spatial orientation, sometimes develop a persistent head tilt to one side that has nothing to do with listening. This kind of tilt looks different from the attentive kind. It's constant, not triggered by speech, and is often accompanied by other symptoms like loss of balance, rapid eye movement, or nausea. If you see a tilt like this, it warrants a vet visit, but not every reduction in head tilting is a medical concern. As dogs mature and become very familiar with their environment and routine, some of the novelty that once drove the behavior simply fades. A dog that once tilted at every new word may tilt less as their vocabulary becomes fully established. The behavior can also reduce during periods of stress, illness, low energy, or emotional withdrawal. Your dog's inner world affects their outer responses more than most people realize. If the tilt disappears alongside other changes in behavior, appetite, or energy, that combination is worth investigating. But if you're otherwise healthy, happy dog is simply tilting less in their senior years. It may just be the quiet confidence of a dog who already knows the language well. How to make your dog tilt more? If you've made it this far, here is your reward. Something genuinely practical that you can use starting today, because head tilting is tied to recognition, vocabulary, and engagement. The most reliable way to bring out more of it is to invest in your dog's language learning. Start by consistently using specific words for specific things. Use the same word every time for a walk, for a toy, for a treat. Dogs build their internal libraries through repetition and association. Every time a new word becomes reliably meaningful to them, you have created a new trigger for the tilt. Play word games. Hold up a toy your dog knows by name and say the name clearly while watching their face. Then introduce a new toy and give it a name. Practice consistently. Over days and weeks, watch for the moment the new word begins to produce a tilt. That moment marks genuine learning. You are literally watching your dog's vocabulary expand in real time. Talk to your dog more and vary your emotional tone deliberately. Say their name with warmth. Ask them questions in a curious, rising tone. Researchers have found that dogs respond more deeply to speech that sounds social and interactive, rather than flat or monotone. The more conversational your voice, the more your dog's brain engages, and the more those tilts will follow. And pay attention to which words produce the strongest tilts in your dog. Those words are windows into what matters most to them. They are the words that have accumulated the most meaning, the most memory, the most emotional weight in your dog's inner world. That list is different for every dog. It is, in a very real sense, a vocabulary of love. The next time your dog tilts their head at something you say, you'll see it differently now. You'll know it isn't random. It isn't just adorable, though it absolutely is. It's the outward sign of a mind actively working to understand you, filtering your voice for meaning, matching sounds to memories, leaning into language with everything. They have doubted your dog is paying attention in a way that most people underestimate. They are listening harder than you know. If you want to see more of that tilt, talk to them more. Teach them more words. Build the shared vocabulary between you, because every word they learn is another point of connection, another small proof that the two of you are genuinely communicating. Across every difference that separates your species, drop a comment below and tell us, which word makes your dog tilt their head the most? We'd love to know. And if this taught you something new about your dog today, make sure you're subscribed. There's a lot more where this came from.